On the morning of May 22nd, 2025, the Riverbend Maximum Security Institution in Nashville, Tennessee was quiet, but inside, everything was set in motion for a long-delayed execution. After 35 years on death row, Oscar Franklin Smith, age 75, was scheduled to die by lethal injection. It had been a journey stretching across decades through trials, appeals, evidence, challenges, and repeated stays of execution. But now time had run out. Before discussing Smith's final words and the injection that would end his life, we must first go back to the beginning, to the night when 3 lives were taken inside a small house on Ludi Street. It was Sunday night, October 1st, 1989, just after 11:20 p.m., when a 911 call came into the Metropolitan Nashville Police Department. The voice on the line was frantic, a terrified young boy begging for help. "Help me!" the caller screamed. He was later identified as 13-year-old Jason Burnett. In the background, another voice shouted, "Frank, no God, help me!" Then, silence. Jason managed to say one last thing before the line went dead, 324 Ludi Street. Police were dispatched immediately. Within 5 minutes, they arrived in the quiet Woodbine neighborhood. The house looked normal from the outside. No broken windows, no sounds, no lights. Officers knocked. No answer. Assuming it was a prank or mistake, they left. But the horror inside 324 Ludi Street would remain hidden until the next day. On October 2nd at 3:70 p.m., officers returned after a concerned neighbor called. This time they went in. What they found was a nightmare. Inside the kitchen, blood was everywhere, splattered on walls, smeared on the floor, and soaked into the furniture. 16-year-old Chad Burnett lay dead on the tile. He had been shot 3 times shoulder, chest, and point blank above the left eye. He had also been stabbed repeatedly in the chest, back, and stomach. His hands showed signs of a fierce struggle. His neck was slashed. In the front bedroom, 35-year-old Judy Smith was found lying on her back. She had been shot in the arm and neck. The neck wound severed her spine. She was paralyzed instantly. The killer then slashed her throat and stabbed her several times. Jason's body was found near the foot of the bed. He hadn't been shot, but the wounds were equally horrific. His abdomen was ripped open. His small intestine protruded. Defensive wounds marked his hands. He bled out over several minutes. The murder weapons were missing, except for one. A blood-covered awl, a sharp leather-punching tool, was left at the scene. Also found a bloody palm print on a bedsheet near Judy's body. It was missing 2 fingers. Police now had a clue, and they had a name. The victims were well known in their neighborhood. Judy Smith, 35, was a single mother working hard to raise her sons, 16-year-old Chad and 13-year-old Jason, from a previous marriage. Neighbors described her as warm, devoted, and protective. Judy had recently separated from her husband, Oscar Franklin Smith, often called Frank. The couple had married in 1985 and had twin boys together, Chris and Casey, but it wasn't a happy union. Frank, born in Ohio, was one of 7 children. He moved to Tennessee with his family as a child. As an adult, he worked maintenance jobs in Laverne and lived in a trailer on his family's land in Pleasant View. He had 2 children from a previous relationship, Laura and Merle, who lived with his parents. To outsiders, the marriage between Judy and Frank appeared to be a fresh start. But by mid-1989, the relationship had turned violent. Judy filed for divorce. A custody battle followed. She was granted temporary custody of the twins. Frank was allowed visitation every other weekend. Behind the legal paperwork, fear was building. Friends and co-workers later testified that Judy, Chad, and Jason all said they were afraid of Frank, and they had reason to be. That summer, during one visit to his trailer, Frank held a gun to Jason's head. He bit the boy and forced Judy and her sons to leave. He told her, "Don't touch the car, don't take the twins, don't call the cops, or I'll kill you." In August, when Judy came back to retrieve her belongings, Frank tied her up, raped her, and threatened to kill her. Charges were filed, but the violence continued. Frank harassed Judy with phone calls threatening to shoot, stab, or kill her and the boys. He believed she treated her sons better than his, and in his mind, that was unforgivable. Inside the house on Ludi Street, detectives began piecing the case together. No forced entry was found. That meant the victims had likely known their killer or trusted him enough to open the door. But the most critical clue was the blood-covered palm print left on a bedsheet near Judy's body. The print was incomplete. It was missing 2 fingers. Police immediately thought of Oscar Franklin Smith. Years earlier, Frank had lost 2 fingers in a work-related accident. The shape of the palm print matched his unique injury. It was enough for investigators to act. At the same time, police uncovered something even more disturbing. Frank had recently taken out life insurance policies on Judy and her 2 older sons, Chad and Jason. The total payout was significant. This gave investigators a possible motive: money. Friends and relatives confirmed that Frank had made threats. Judy's co-workers remembered hearing disturbing phone calls at the restaurant where she worked. He talked about shooting, stabbing, and even killing the children. Then came the final warning. While picking up the twins, Frank looked Judy's father in the eye and said, "I've been playing with her with kid gloves, but now the gloves are coming off." A search of Frank's trailer turned up no murder weapon, but the forensic evidence from the crime scene was enough. Blood patterns, bullet trajectories, and the palm print all pointed to Frank. On October 5th, just 4 days after the murders, Oscar Franklin Smith was arrested and charged with 3 counts of capital murder. Oscar Franklin Smith's trial began in July 1990, less than a year after the murders. The prosecution laid out a clear narrative: motive, means, and opportunity. The life insurance policies, the threats, and the bloody palm print all pointed to Frank. Crime scene investigators took the stand. They confirmed that the palm print matched Smith's hand. The 2 missing fingers were identical to those Frank had lost years before. Ballistic evidence showed the bullets pulled from the victims came from the same .22 caliber weapon. Though the gun was never found, the shell casings matched the scene. Prosecutors emphasized the brutality of the crime: multiple victims, multiple weapons, premeditation. They painted a picture of a man who could not accept losing control over his family. The defense countered with a different theory. They argued the fingerprint evidence was weak, circumstantial. Years later, a private fingerprint expert hired by the defense would say the original analysis was rushed and inconclusive. But at the time of trial, jurors weren't convinced. Testimonies from friends, co-workers, and family reinforced Frank's pattern of threats and violence. The picture was consistent and damning. On July 26, 1990, after less than a day of deliberation, the jury found Oscar Franklin Smith guilty on all 3 counts of capital murder. 2 days later, he was sentenced to death. The appeals process began almost immediately, but the initial verdict would stand for the next 35 years. After his sentencing, Oscar Franklin Smith was transferred to Riverbend Maximum Security Institution in Nashville. He would remain there for the next 35 years, becoming one of Tennessee's longest-serving death row inmates. His defense team began filing appeals immediately. Over the decades, they challenged the forensic evidence, questioned the reliability of witness statements, and pushed for new DNA testing. None of it overturned the verdict. In 2022, Smith came within hours of execution. His final meal had already been served. But just before the scheduled time, Tennessee Governor Bill Lee issued a last-minute reprieve. The reason: a critical mistake in the lethal injection protocol. The chemicals used had not been properly tested for endotoxins, a required safety step. The governor halted not only Smith's execution, but all others scheduled in Tennessee that year. In response, the Tennessee Department of Correction launched an internal investigation. Over the next 2 years, they rebuilt the state's execution procedures. The result? a new single drug protocol using pentobarbital designed to meet federal standards. This reset the clock. In early 2025, officials scheduled Smith's execution once again, this time for May 22nd. He was now 75 years old. Despite new petitions and public pressure from death penalty opponents, courts upheld the sentence. Legal avenues were exhausted, and for the fourth time since 1990, Oscar Franklin Smith faced the reality of death. On the evening of May 21st, 2025, Oscar Franklin Smith was served his final meal: hot dogs, tater tots, apple pie, and vanilla ice cream. Under the new protocol, it had to be finished before midnight. The next morning, May 22nd, Riverbend Prison entered lockdown. Guards moved in silence. Just after 9:00 a.m., Smith was prepared for execution. At 10:32 a.m., the curtains separating the witness room from the execution chamber were drawn open. Inside, Smith lay strapped to the gurney. He appeared calm. A spiritual advisor stood by his side, softly singing the hymn, "I'll Fly Away." 2 intravenous lines had been inserted into Smith's right arm. When asked for final words, he took a deep breath and began to speak slowly, deliberately. "I didn't kill her," he said. Then he turned his message toward Tennessee Governor Bill Lee and the broader justice system. For nearly 3 minutes, Smith spoke calmly but forcefully. "Somebody needs to tell the governor the justice system doesn't work," he said. "He's the last word, the last person to give justice where justice is needed. Too many innocent people are being killed." His voice rose slightly. "He needs to quit. Get a backbone." He looked toward the witnesses, then added, "Our justice system is broken, and he has the power to stop this. We have more men waiting to die at Riverbend. I won't be the first, and I won't be the last." At 10:36 a.m., the drug pentobarbital began flowing through the IV lines. Smith's voice weakened, his breathing slowed. By 10:38 a.m., he had stopped speaking. His chest rose and fell, then stilled. At 10:47 a.m., he was pronounced dead. Oscar Franklin Smith was 75 years old. His execution closed a chapter that had begun more than 3 decades earlier with a phone call, a scream for help, and a house full of silence. The execution of Oscar Franklin Smith ended one of Tennessee's longest-running death penalty cases. For over 35 years, his name remained on court dockets, legal motions, and death row rosters. To prosecutors and some members of the victims' families, justice had finally been served. But for others, questions lingered about the palm print, the evidence, and whether every stone had truly been turned. Smith maintained his innocence until his final breath. His words, directed at the state's highest officials, echoed through the chamber and beyond, a warning, a protest, or perhaps a last declaration of defiance. Today, the case of Oscar Franklin Smith remains a point of debate, a symbol for some of closure and for others of a system still in need of reform. One thing is certain, it all began with a 911 call, a house on Luty Street, and 3 lives cut short in the dead of night.